The South African Communist Party is today launching its 2019-2020 Red October campaign. The launch will be addressed by SACP General Secretary Dr. Blade Nzimande. Let's take you there live now.
Ingakho ngilikomani singilikomani Andla
wait.
Let me start by greeting you, Comrade National Chair, Deputy National Chair, Comrade Thulas Nxesi, and let me also greet our national office bearers, our National Treasurer, Comrade Joyce Mloyi Murupa, our First Deputy General Secretary, Comrade Soli Mapaila, our Second Deputy General Secretary, Comrade Chris Matlaku, and all other members of the Central Committee who have joined us on this important occasion. Let me also greet Comrade Alvin Botes, who is here representing the African National Congress as a member of its National Executive Committee, and thank him very much for his message he delivered today. Let me also greet Comrade Mike Shingange, the First Deputy President of COSATU, and also thank you, Comrade Mike, for your message. And Comrade Tinyiko Dini, the Secretary, National Secretary of our YCL, Ufasimba, and also thanks for a wonderful message. And let me greet comrades, all of you who have joined us here, as well as those who have joined us through our live streaming. Hunger eradication, health, human settlements, and water. We are launching our SACP 2020 Red October campaign based on these critical interconnected challenges in our society. Their relevance today is as great, if not greater, than when in the early 1990s, our late General Secretary, Comrade Chris Hani, launched the Triple H campaign, which at the time meant health, housing, and hunger. That earlier campaign achieved an important impact and milestone upon the content of what then became the ANC's 1994 election manifesto. The RDP, or the Reconstruction and Development Program, a policy document whose general line of march remains absolutely valid even today. The RDP programmatic statement that is still sadly remains unfulfilled in many ways, as has been flat-lit in the COVID-19 pandemic. Let us also use today by foregrounding, by honoring the often unsung heroes of the frontline workers in the struggle against COVID-19. Now, more than before, many people are beginning to appreciate the importance of jobs that we used to look down at, like cleaners. And as we have said before, who would have thought that a security officer, a worker at the gate of a hospital, can take the temperature of a medical doctor, and if the temperature is too high, tell the doctor that you are not going to come into this gate, go and get health attention as a matter of urgency. That's the working class that as the SACP we've been fighting for and saying without that working class, there would be no society. Without those frontline workers, we can never defeat the invisible enemy of COVID-19. Sithi kunina abasebenzi nomgogodla wempilo yethu nomnotho wethu nezwe lakithi. Today, as we take up our Triple H plus water campaign, we do so in the midst of the gravest global capitalist crisis since the 1930s. It is a crisis triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic, but it occurs against the background of and further exacerbates the pre-existing multidimensional economic, social, and environmental crises, both within South Africa and globally. This campaign, of course, takes us to our centenary, the 100 years of the SACP next year. Here in South Africa, the past weeks have brought the dismal but not unexpected news of a second quarter 16% GDP collapse and the further loss of 2.2 million jobs, bringing our actual unemployment rate into an entirely unsustainable 50% plus range. Youth unemployment is likely now to be around 70%. This is simply unsustainable. On this trajectory, our country does indeed face social collapse. And yet there is also hope. There are real possibilities and the absolute necessity for a struggle for a different world to break the chains of neoliberal austerity to forge a different sustainable relationship with the environment. All around the world, there is a renewed popular upsurge and a growing realization of the imperative to build what we might call a post-capitalist global order. What does that mean? It means we must put people before profits. It means we must put environmental sustainability before corporate greed. It means we must make the financial speculators and the horde of parasites redundant, not the workers. We must not retrench the workers. We must retrench the financial speculators and the parasites who are living on the blood of the working class. We must acknowledge and mainstream the huge role played by women, not least in the care economy. We must recognize and formalize what the pandemic has made crystal clear. The millions in the informal economy, street vendors, and others who are doing essential work. The SACP slogan, "Socialism is the future, build it now," is more relevant than ever. Let us use this Red October campaign to give concrete content to that slogan. Let us build working class and popular confidence and capacity. Let us foster a socialist morality of sharing and caring, not of greed and dog eat dog. Let us construct in struggle, not just in theory, the building blocks of socialism in the present. As Comrade Krisani always insisted, socialism must not be seen as some distant and abstract utopia. It is not about big words. It's about very basic things. Socialism is about nutritious food for the people. It's about dignified shelter, safe drinking and water for other uses, and accessible health care. Let us also build on and learn from what is already happening. That's what good communists do. In preparation for today's launch, the SACP convened a webinar on Friday involving experts and activists in their fields, but also our party structures. What we learned was that in townships, in villages, and informal settlements, party cadres are active, sometimes directly under the SACP banner, at other times as activists in the trade union movement and in community-based programs and networks. We today commit to deepen that work. Much of this work is unheralded. In Lavender Hill, for instance, in Cape Town, party and ANC comrades, together with many other community activists, are running free food kitchens, food gardens, and trauma counseling. In Limpopo, during the COVID-19 lockdown, initiatives have been taken to coordinate the food that people in a village grow to enable selling produce to each other, to lessen the dependence on the retailers charging high prices for food that otherwise can be produced locally. In Mpumalanga, an SACP branch works every weekend helping in a food garden to support elderly widows and single widowers. In Vosloorus, there are community food gardens still functioning that were started by the party branch in the late 1990s. In my own home township, Dambuza Road in Maritzburg, the youth is busy moving from section to section, cleaning our living areas. In Jubetin in the northwest, a housing stockfell set out to build their own homes and organize to get assistance from the provincial government. Some of these many programs, comrades, have been a direct response to the deepening crises sparked by the COVID-19 pandemic. Others have been scaled up on the basis of pre-existing community programs and networks. These are just but a few examples of thousands of grassroots initiatives that are being undertaken across our country. We need to share these experiences. We need to learn from each other. We need to massively expand this work. We have red brigades who have valiantly taken up so many party campaigns. Let these red brigades now become COVID-19 compliance brigades. Let them become food security brigades. We must also, comrades, as part of harnessing this energy, build district development forums. Government has taken an important decision to build more effective all-of-government cooperation through the district development model. This also becomes an ideal site to build greater popular participatory involvement in order to achieve the objectives of our H plus water campaign. We are calling on all SACP provinces and district structures to play an active role in establishing popular district development forums. We are saying today a good SACP provincial secretary must be involved in building district development forums. A good SACP district secretary must build popular district development forums. A good SACP branch secretary must be involved in building popular district development forums. So should our alliance leaders on the ground must be part of this. We are saying today we must build working class and popular unity in action. Our approach to campaigning must never, comrades, be limited to a service delivery protest mode. While such protests are important in highlighting real issues confronting working class communities, we need to position the working class and broader popular forces not just as complainants or plaintiffs, not just as under-service clients of a delivery state, but as the makers and drivers of change. A democratic state and organized and mobilized working class and popular forces need to be the co-producers of radical transformation. And by radical transformation, we don't mean theft of public resources we mean concrete changes of the conditions of ordinary people on the ground for the better. Building unity in action means forging much greater unity with the organized working class. As the SACP today, we welcome the fact that SAFTU, the Trade Union Federation, has committed its full support to the COSATU general strike of October 7th. It is a strike against corruption and austerity. It is a strike against government's illegal reneging on its own commitments in the Public Sector Central Bargaining Forum. The SACP extends its full support to this day of action and to the demands advanced by the two largest and socialist federations in our country. We're doing this not opportunistically or in a populist fashion. It's because as South African communists, we are nothing else other than the sons and daughters of South Africa's workers. Unity in action also requires struggles that unite the formally employed and organized with the unemployed and those in the informal sector. Unity in action also requires that we broaden our struggles to include the widest array of popular forces, not least the millions of middle strata, by the way, who face massive problems of indebtedness, home repossessions, unaffordable health care, and much more. Siyamakomanisi sithi sikhathazekile ukuthi iningi labantu bakithi livele ngeenwele licilwe ezikweletini nalabo bekungathi baphila impilo engconywana ama-professionals akithi nabo bavele ngeenwele bacwile ezikweletini. We are saying today we must engender hunger eradication, healthcare, human settlements, and water. We must integrate the Joe Slovo Foundation SACP COSATU White Ribbon campaign against gender-based violence into our approach to the Red October campaign. Asilwe neyishimane ehlukumeza abantu besifazane ezingasakwazi ukukhuluma nabantu besifazane ngendlela enokuhlonipha kodwa abazi ukuthi umuntu wesifazane into yokuhlukunyezwa nalabo abaseyikhundleni abazi ukuthi ukuze umuntu wesifazane athole umsebenzi kufanele aqale ucansini kuqala. Samakomanisi namhlanje sithi njengoba singena kulo Red October sizolwa neyishimane phansi neyishimane phansi. Gender inequality results in hunger, illness, inaccess to water and housing. And this burden is disproportionately carried by women. Knowing that you have a safe place to stay makes it easy to leave the abuser so as to live another day. Women's ownership of houses provides shelter for an entire family. That's why as South African communists we are saying to our women, don't keep on hoping that my boyfriend or my husband is abusing me today, but tomorrow he may be better. No. That is why also as South African communists we are saying, we must not humiliate women who leave their marriages because they are being abused. Sibabize nangamagama angasile sithi omabuye emendweni. Akho mabuye emendweni. Mina nje uma ngingakhuluma njengobaba ozala izingane zamantombazana. Izingane zami zamantombazana uma zihluleka emendweni azibuyele ekhaya ziyohlala zinekhona njalo ngoba kungcono uyilanda ingane yakhe isaphila kunokuba uyilanda siyisidumbu ngebhokisi. Access to a meal without any strife helps to save a life. Women's ownership of houses provides shelter for an entire family. Skilling and employing women and ensuring guaranteed minimum income for every woman helps the fight against hunger and makes women less dependent on abusers for food. When access to compassionate health practitioners is easily gained, evidence of rape and abuse will be better obtained. Women should have access to 24-hour health care and feminine hygiene products. On tap, potable water in safe and secure locations minimizes the vulnerability of women, and abuse will be better fought against. Women should have access to all the services that they need so that they are less vulnerable to assault and assist them to preserve their dignity. Access to water for hygiene boosts self-esteem and confidence to actively participate in activities. Our Triple H campaign plus water must go hand in hand with a mass public employment program. There is now widespread support, and we welcome this as the SACP, that at NEDLAC, the partners now are calling for a mass public employment program, which has to be a key response to the crisis. Part of this mass public employment program must also mean that we employ more and more cleaners, who today we now know they are so important in our fight against COVID-19. As the SACP, we believe that much of this program should be based on the Community Works Program model. It is a ward-based model, public sector facilitated, but actively run by local non-profit organizations and community-based organizations, in which the projects are democratically selected by the community participants. These may range from community food gardens, community safety networks, cultural activities and sports coaching, township infrastructure and maintenance, and cleanup work, environmental work, school feeding, assisting early childhood centers, and women's safety havens, community health outreach, and much more. Hayi maqabane ngeke, zingcolile indawo esihlala kuzona. Zingcole ziyasabisa, ungathi kuhlala magundane, akuhlala abantu abaphilayo. Sithi ngalo mkhankaso wethu ake sisukume, silekelele laba bathi indawo zethu mazihlanzeke zibe clean. Akwazi ukuthi amadolobha ethu ayebukeka emahle ngesikhathi sobandlululo, kodwa ukuthi uma sekuphethe thina kuvele kube umhume nje amahoko okungathi akuhlala abantu abaphilayo. The SACP is also calling for an immediate introduction of a universal basic income grant. The levels of social distress with the new job loss bloodbath on top of existing crises means that apart from thousands of localized initiatives and programs, we have to respond with urgency and across the board. The special COVID-19 social relief distress grant of 350 Rand per month has offered a survival lifeline to millions. But that grant is now due to expire at the end of this month. As the SACP, we are saying we cannot allow this to happen. The SACP calls for a basic income grant that is universal. In other words, that is not means tested to avoid costly administrative overheads. Phambili nge-basic income grant phambili. Hunger and malnutrition in our country are a scandal in a country that produces enough food to feed all its people. Nearly 50% of South Africans are food insecure, yet our extensive but labor-shedding capital-intensive commercial agricultural sector, heavily reliant on pesticides, fertilizers, and other anti-environmental practices, produces more than enough food to feed South Africa. Ngamanye amazwi izwe lethu likhiqiza ukudla okwanele ukuthi kungadla wonke umuntu ingabibikho indlala. Kodwa uhalf wabantu bakithi bayalamba. Hunger relates not just to having enough food, but also critically having a nutritionally balanced diet. Apart from hunger, South Africa has a major diabetes crisis, which particularly impacts on working class communities and as a reflection of poor nutrition. The COVID-19 pandemic and the hard lockdown further exposed just how vulnerable millions of South Africans are to food insecurity. However, there were also very impressive campaigns to deal with this, as we had outlined before. The hard lockdown also exposed how important informal street traders are, not just for their own household sustainability, but for providing affordable food for the working class. Thina ebesibabukela phansi odadewethu nabafowethu abadayisa ukudla emgaqweni sibone kahle uma sekuthiwa sivalelwe endlini ukuthi lamagwinya abawadayisa emgaqweni abaluleke kangakanani empilweni zethu. Yet these traders encounter a great deal of administrative harassment, particularly from local municipalities. We are saying as the SACP today to all our municipalities, stop harassing informal traders. Their rights to trade must be recognized and formalized. Asiceli lento, siyayisho. Uma ngabe nohulumeni basekhaya bakhethwe yithi, nizokwenza lento efunwa abantu bakithi, singenzi into esingayazi ukuthi ifunwa ubani. The rights of rural women living in the former homelands must secure tenured access to productive land, and this must be entrenched. Lento yokuthi umhlaba kufanele unikwe amadoda kuphela, kufanele iphele lonto. Isikhathi esiningi omama bakwazi ukusebenzisa lo mhlaba ukukhiqiza ukudla nezinye izinto eziyimpilo ezidingakalayo. The increased indebtedness of the working class and the lower middle classes in wake of the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbates the food insecurity and deepens the crisis of social reproduction of many a household. In other words, many of our households are struggling to make ends meet. This indebtedness must be addressed in our economic recovery and development strategy and in building an inclusive economy. Consideration should be given to another debt amnesty and or other debt relief measures for workers and the lower middle classes who are often at the mercy of private financial capital. Asifuni ukubona abantu bakithi bedlelwa izindlu ngenxa yekweletu. Asifuni ukubona abantu bakithi abanye bedlelwa imoto nempahla zabo ngenxa yekweletu. Sithi akube nenhlelo yokuthi kube nendlela yokuthi abantu bakithi baphunyuzwe kuleli joka lekweletu. Kodwa masisho njalo phela sisho ukuthi abantu bakithi abahambe nje bayofuna ikweletu noma kanjani. Sikusho lokhu ngoba siyazi isikhathi esiningi bakweleta ngoba bazama ukuziphilisa. We now need the very rapid advance to a national health insurance. The COVID-19 pandemic has emphasized with the greatest urgency the absolute necessity on how advancing very rapidly with the implementation of a comprehensive national health insurance system based on the principle of solidarity. As the SACP today, we are saying, to advance rapidly towards the NHI, we need to do the following. Thina sifana nalabantu abafane bathi akwenzeka izinto kodwa bangakwazi ukusho ukuthi sizokwenzeka kanjani. We are not populists. We don't call for things to happen when we do not know and when we do not have ideas how they should happen, which is what we are outlining now on how the NHI should happen. We say down with budget cuts and the creeping defunding of the public healthcare system. The public health system needs more human and financial resources. We can't be cutting health budget in the midst of a pandemic. We say, implement the long-standing resolution to develop a state-owned capacity to produce desperately needed pharmaceutical so that affordability and availability are based on social need and not market forces. We are also saying as the SACP, and I'm not saying this because I'm deployed as the Minister of Science, you can't cut down on science funding in the middle of a pandemic when we need more of science, for instance, to research and find vaccines to be able to save the lives of our people. We call for much greater transparency in the health sector in general, and we need to stamp out corruption and neglect. We call on trade unions, Comrade Mike, in their wage and other demands to make the NHI a key component of the social wage demand. In particular, trade unions in the private largest companies must also put pressure on their bosses to appreciate the value of an NHI. It's not enough to just demand NHI in the public sector. We must also demand it in the private sector, where there are millions and millions of rands that are not invested, that are not being spent, whilst workers are dying from preventable diseases. We must not only mobilize the workers and urban rural poor around the NHI, for increasingly indebted middle strata with costly medical aids that rapidly become depleted, forcing you to pay for health care out of pocket. The NHI will be a vital advance for you. Siyazazi lezi zinto iningi leni njengoba nesibuka namhlanje la. Seniqalile njengoba ku-October senikhokha emakhukhwini. Ngoba i-medical aid iphelile imali yakhona. Bathi abasezi ukukhokhela noma ngabe uguliswa yini. To the cynics who query affordability of an NHI, we say quite simply, the NHI is something that we cannot not afford. If you ever doubted this before, the COVID-19 pandemic, then surely now is the time to change your views. We've always been calling for an NHI. Even those who are doubting today must realize that because of COVID-19, this issue has been underlined even more because private medical health care is not going to assist us to deal with pandemics. And we are still going to be having more pandemics in the world because of capitalist greed that is destroying natural environment and also leading to climate change. On water and sanitation, which is another campaign in our Red October campaign, we are saying that whilst there's been progress since 1994 in providing access to safe water and sanitation, we are falling far behind our goals to provide 100% coverage by 2030. While many of our written policies are world-class, actual transformation and implementation are often weak. Water licensing is still in favor of the pre-1994 beneficiaries. South Africa is a water-scarce country, although science can help us to desalinate seawater. And therefore, there is an urgent need to rapidly change our approach to water and sanitation. That's why we say we must invest more in science. There are many sustainable technologies, some developed by an excellent cadre of South African researchers, but we have failed to develop them for the market, and the intellectual property, production and marketing have now been taken over by other countries. The other challenge we face, government funds a lot of research, but some products that are marketed and commercialized out of that research, government doesn't benefit. Just to make an example, insulin to manage diabetes was discovered at the University of Toronto in 1929. Comrade Nobala Solimapail, do you know that the doctor who discovered insulin was paid $1? Count from 1929 to 2020, and you tell me how many billions of dollars have been made by pharmaceutical companies who are selling that insulin. Therefore, publicly funded research must also see some money coming back to the state so that we can fund more research. In community struggles, we need to mobilize to protect our key infrastructure, including water infrastructure, from vandalism. As the SACP, we feel very strongly about this, that as we launch our Red October campaign, we must protect public infrastructure. We want to repeat this. If you are protesting for a road, you can't destroy a clinic. If we are protesting for NSFAS, you can't then go and destroy an HIV/AIDS clinic in a university that is supporting staff and students. When the SACP first launched its Triple H campaign under the leadership of our late General Secretary Chris Hani in the early 1990s, we tended to focus on houses. The RDP of 1994 estimated a housing backlog of 3 million. But the backlog remained 3 million. We built 3 million houses, but it remains 3 million, owing to many factors. Rapid urbanization, thanks to the abolition of apartheid control measures, but also due to a general failure to rapidly implement rural land reform. The RDP housing has been beset with a number of problems, comrades. Instead of publicly owned construction capacity or of a people's brigade approach to housing construction, new township houses has been outsourced. In other words, we give out housing as tenders. That is why some of the tenderpreneurs, they get paid 100,000 rands to build a house, but they end up building a house that is not even worth 20,000 rand. That's why as the SACP we are saying, let's have a program to assist our people to build their own houses. To focus on houses alone and not on viable human settlements with local employment possibilities and with recreational and other communal amenities has seen the replication of the apartheid era dormitory townships pattern. Lezi zindlu ze-RDP esithi siyazakha. Sisazakha le kude namadolobha nala kunemsebenzi khona. Sisenza nje kufane indlela abantu abahlala ngayo nesimo ababehlala ngaso ngaphansi kohulumeni wobandlululo. In this Red October campaign, the SACP, together with a range of allied formations, will be taking forward our campaign against brutal evictions and home repossessions. Khona nalento embi, udlelwe indlu yakho, usukhokha 700,000 rand, kuthi usakweleta omunye 700,000 rand, bese idayisa 100 rand. Kodwa wena usale nesikweletu sika 700,000. We can no longer just allow this thing. Through this campaign, we are taking up this. It can't be that banks sell people's houses for nothing and still leave them owing hundreds of thousands of rands. People, their houses must be sold at market value. And if there is change from what was left, that money must not be taken by the banks. It must be taken by our own people. We will campaign for the active transformation of human settlements, including through calling for the cancellation of private housing contracts, where there are not the required skills with all monies recuperated. Yihlazo kahle kahle lento. Lamakope ezindle sizakhayo ngenxa yokuthi sinikwa amathenda beba abantu bakithi bengakwazi ukuzakhela izindlu zabo. Sithi samagomanisi ayiphele lonto. Sithi kubantu bakithi sebenzani nathi. Sithi ANC sebenzani nathi. Sithi kwikhosathu sebenzani nathi. Sisho kuzo zonke izakhiwo ezihambisana nalombutho wethu nalomfela ndawonye wethu we-alliance sebenzisani nathi ukubhekana nalezi zinto. A major people-driven program based on community works programs principles for the upgrading of well-located informal settlements must be pursued. We are also saying we want expanded construction of rental stock and the effective regulation of rentals. We are saying let's address security of tenure and get title deeds for our people, and also urban land reform, including expropriation of well-located land for mixed use, mixed income development must be fast-tracked. A very important message, comrades, and to fellow South Africans, that with this Red October campaign we are sending, is that we cannot be able to address the Triple H and water without at the same time waging the struggle against gender-based violence. I have already highlighted this, but the reason why we are saying so is because we must never tire to fight this new pandemic of gender-based violence. The struggle for sustainable human settlements, for dignified and accessible health care, for access to safe water and sanitation, and against hunger, all connect dynamically with the struggle against patriarchal oppression and all of its morbid symptoms. Umama wakwami uMantombela angikhulumeli yena lana inkokheli zami. Ube ngitshela ekseni namhlanje ethi uya kwi-Red October wokhumbula-ke mina wakwathi uDG wethu ngisekwi-public service asingene ngo-6 ekseni. Ngamtshela ngathi uma uthi angingene ngo-6 ekseni ubani ozohambisa iy'ngane zami esikoleni ngoba iy'ngane zihanjiswa yimina. In other words, we must structure even our work arrangements such that they take into account the reality that actually faces women. Access to safe water, for instance, will liberate millions of women and young girls from the drudgery and often danger of fetching water from distant streams. We also know that poor sanitation is a cause of lots of problems. And poor sanitation, by the way, is nothing else other than indignity. We are saying in this Red October campaign, we must fight also a struggle on two fronts. This is important. We are saying no to corruption and lawlessness, but we are also saying no to austerity. The sectoral focuses of our 2020 Red October campaign, which is health, human settlements, hunger, and water, are fundamentally related to the broader strategic positioning that the SACP's September Central Committee elaborated for the present period. It is a struggle, as I say, on two fronts. It's a struggle against corruption and lawlessness, and it's a struggle against austerity. That's why we are happy now that law enforcement agencies are beginning to arrest, and we are saying to them, arrest even more. Popular struggles against the crises on the health front, in homelessness, in hunger and access to safe water and sanitation, all invariably bump into these challenges. We try to provide housing, we bump into corruption and lawlessness. On the other hand, we also bump into the crushing impact of a dogmatic, fundamentalist, self-destructive, neoliberal austerity, even old-fashioned policies being pushed by Treasury and the South African Reserve Bank, and a range of neoliberal enforcers, including the ratings agencies, the IMF, and much of the mainstream commentariat on the other. When SACP districts take up community-based campaigns for access to water, they run into a tangled web of lawless destruction of bulk infrastructure, so that corrupt water tanker tenderpreneurs with connections into municipalities can profit off people's most basic right. Amanye lamasela esikhuluma ngawo anemoto deliver amanzi. Bahamba bayophula amapipe lapha asebenza amanzi ukuze abantu bangawathola amanzi ukuze kuqashwe bona ukuthi abahambisa amanzi benza imali. Abanye yibo abathumela abantu ebusuku ukuyolimaza infrastructure ngoba bafuna ukuthi kuqashwe bona ukuze benze imali. Ngamanye amazwi ubusela buncisha abantu amathuba okwazi ukuziphilisa ngoba befuna ukuthi lawo masela kube yiwona kuphela akwazi ukudla and adle angadeli. Treasury is now further reducing expenditure by 21 billion rands for 2021 and by 28.5 billion rands for 2021-2022, and defying, unfortunately, the Public Sector Budget Bargaining Council agreement. Unless this self-defeating austerity is reversed, this pro-cyclical austerity, which is out of step with most countries in the world, at a time of catastrophic economic decline, will drive South Africa into a total failed state impasse, possibly as soon as 2022. Sihlaleleni siyabasebenzi, siyabantu base South Africa. Sibukela kukhona abazosishumayeza ngale austerity. Ukuthi asinciphisi yonke indawo ngendlela efanayo. Sibe sazi ukuthi lezi zinto zizosidalela inkinga engakanani. Abanye babo bazokhuluma nezinto ezingasenzeki kwamanye amazwe ngisho ngqiwa sebaziyeka lezi zinto okuthiwa zizokwenziwa la eSouth Africa. Fana nokudayisela impahla eyisekeni zibe zikhona impahla ezintsha. While corruption is a massive drain on our society, we must actively fight the illusion, though, that neoliberal austerity is the most effective weapon against corruption. We need a massive stimulus program focused on mass job creation, reindustrialization, and a just green transition. We want to say no to corruption and lawlessness, but we also want to say no to austerity. Usually, the two things, corruption and austerity, have the same effect. They undermine our developmental agenda. Now, once more, as I move towards closing, we want to say as the SACP, all what we've been saying so far, how do we pay for it? Because we are a responsible communist party, we just don't demand. We also come up with concrete suggestions on how to fund this, because we are not populists. Like eminye imibutho engeke ngiyibize ngamagama eyazi ukuthi nje kugijinywa kuyodestroywa kuyokwenziwa izinto, but uma ubabuza ukuthi sizozenza kanjani lento imali izovela lapha bakwazi ukukutshela. SACP has got the answers, and here are they. Before the global COVID-19 pandemic, there was a growing awareness, even in relatively mainstream international quarters, that neoliberal orthodoxy was not working. Let me even quote the Financial Times, which is a global mouthpiece for finance capital. It says, and I quote, "Governments will have to accept a more active role in the economy. They must see public services as investments rather than liabilities, and look for ways to make labor markets less insecure. Redistribution will again be on the agenda. Policies until recently considered eccentric, such as basic income and wealth tax, will have to be in the mix." Unquote. Where are our fundamentalist neoliberals? Their friends have left them behind. They come and want to sell us old-fashioned things here. Unfortunately, key institutions within the South African state, as we have said, unfortunately, including Treasury and the Reserve Bank, they remain recalcitrant, neoliberal, true believers stuck in a provincial and destructive orthodoxy while global fashions are changing. Whose interest is this old-fashioned fundamentalist agenda serving? Whose interest is a call for SAA to be liquidated serving? It's serving those capitalists who are waiting on the wings to capture the SAA market for their own greed. We are destroying our airline when the post-lockdown situation is gonna need an aviation strategy with an airline where the state has got a say, also in order to promote tourism. But we are told, liquidate SAA. As the SACP, we are totally opposed to the liquidation of SAA. Some people are saying, yeah, but SAA, it's flying the rich people. It's not for workers. That's very short-sighted. It's workers who clean these aeroplanes. It's workers who fix these aeroplanes. It's workers who are employed in the tourism sector. This thing that one group of workers is better than another group, or we can get rid of one set of workers against the other. We want to say, as the Communist Party today, the working class struggle is indivisible. Comrade Mike Shingange, we want to repeat this. The working class struggle is indivisible. There is considerable scope, therefore, for a much more relaxed monetary and fiscal policy in South Africa. That's what we are calling for, and that's where we can get money from. While there are important and still open debates within South Africa, and in which the SACP is engaging among a variety of anti-neoliberal progressive economists, academics and research institutions, there is an important convergence amongst us based on the following. Where do we get money? Let's embark on anti-austerity measures. The question should not be, can we afford a universal income grant or a massive public employment program or a publicly led reindustrialization program? The stark reality is that we cannot not afford to implement a massive, publicly driven and funded stimulus and recovery program. The alternative is social collapse.